Hello, I'm going to go over the midterm essay homework project. The due date is available on Canvas. This is one of the artifacts, small sculptures that we discussed back from the prehistoric art learning unit. Just as a reminder, we've covered a lot of really interesting cultures, and so hopefully this project and the way I'm setting it up for you will be of interest, and keep me posted always with any questions. So for the midterm project, you're going to want to pick at least one of the historical periods from the 5 art history civilizations we have studied during the first half of the semester. So you can pick prehistoric art, Mesopotamian art and cultures, Egyptian culture and art, ancient Aegean culture and art, or Greek culture and art. So you've got 5 civilizations, 5 learning units, lots and lots of information that we've covered and resources that are available to you in those different learning units on Canvas. So you might want to go back and revisit and remind yourself which one of these cultures, historical periods, inspired you the most. Maybe it was the artifacts that have been discovered, maybe it was the architecture, maybe it was the people and the way that their beliefs worked from either their political beginnings of their political infrastructure to their religious beliefs. Lots of different things that you can apply to this essay. So what I've done for the midterm project is I've come up with 3 different guidelines, ideas, sort of ways for you to approach this midterm essay process. And so you only need to pick one of the 3 midterm project ideas that I'm presenting in this lecture. And if you have any questions, just send me an email via Canvas. So first I'm going to go over just the main requirements, and then I'll go over the 3 different project ideas. So your midterm project needs to be a minimum of 800 words. You're going to need to embed the images that you're discussing of either the artwork or the artifact, or if you do choose to talk about architecture, that's fine as well. But you're going to want to have at least one image of the artifact that's included in your midterm essay project. And you might want to write this in Word and then put it into a PDF and then upload it to the assignment section for the midterm homework project. It's required that you include the physical properties, and I'm going to go over this again, but basically underneath the image or next to the image, however you want to put it, you're going to want to include those physical properties. With some of the more ancient artifacts, you might not find the artist's name, but in some of the learning units, we did get to a place where the artist's name has been uncovered. But you should always be able to find the name of the artwork, the date the artwork was made, the size of the artwork, the materials that were used in making the artwork, and then the technique. So this particular sculpture was discussed, and they talked about how it was sculpted and painted when it was originally made, what the function might be. And so just a short description of what the artifact's function was at the time that it was made. And so this was something that would have been used in the tomb as, representing, I think it was the butcher, right? So it was representing one of the servants who would be serving the person who had been who was deceased, the person who the tomb was created for. And then if you can find out where it's currently displayed, I think that's just interesting to start to notice and pay attention where it was originated, and then kind of who's housing the object now. So you're going to want to include the physical properties in your essay. And then your essay structure, so you might want to start with the image and then have this following structure, and then end with your 3 references. So the essay structure, in the introduction, you should tell me which historical period you're writing your essay on. and which of the project ideas you're following. I'm going to talk about those in just a sec. You need to apply the 4 types of investigations. So you would have already applied the physical properties, but you also need to talk about any sort of structural or compositional elements. And you can go back, that was covered in the very first module. Any symbolism, what the subject matter is, and then how the object was sort of integrated into the cultural context at the time. So as much as you can about, like, again, how this object was used, how it might have been connected to the belief system of the culture that used this object. And in conclusion, just, what are the main points that from what you learned from this project? And at least 3 references. So those can be links to the websites where you got most of your information. So these are the 3 different project ideas. So the midterm project idea 1 is to compare and contrast 2 objects from 2 different periods of art. So here, this is just an example. You could compare the woman of Oldendorf to the figure of a woman. And, obviously they're about 20,000 years apart. So you could do some really interesting comparison. And I've given you the prompts that you would explore if you chose to do the compare and contrast of 2 different periods in art history. So of course you're going to include the physical properties. I've discussed that. You're going to want to talk about the visual similarities and differences of the object, how the material of the object, so what it was made of, might also affect the look and style. So just thinking about the tools that were available when the woman of Oldendorf was created compared to the tools that were available when the figure of a woman was created. And so that would be something where the material and the tools obviously affect the overall style of the object. What was the use of the object? So in the prehistoric learning unit, we talked a lot about what we think this object might have been used for. So you're going to want to do some research and add that to your essay. The cultural context of the object. So, in relationship to what was going on in that civilization. So how did the belief system, either religiously or mystically or politically, but how did the belief system of that culture relate to these objects? The visual significance or symbolism, which is, important to think about because most of these objects did have some sort of symbolism. And then just kind of, what was going on in the civilization at the time and how that might have impacted the representation and the visual signification of the object. So those are great key elements that you would include in your essay if you chose to do this compare and contrast of 2 different art periods, 2 different objects. Midterm project idea 2 is to compare ancient art with modern art. So here I'm comparing the work of Pablo Picasso to a sculpture that was from the Cycladic period. And so again, you'd want to go back and research that period and probably do a little bit of research about Picasso. And then these are the prompts that you would respond to and reference and give you a base for like what your paper might be about. So of course the physical properties, which I've talked about here. So if you're comparing a painting of Picasso's work to one of these sculptures, you would need to include the physical properties for both of those artifacts, and you would need to include images as well. So most of your essays will probably have 2 images if you chose to do one of these compare and contrast. And again, the physical properties, all the details that you can find about that object would also need to be included. And then you'd want to talk about the visual similarities and differences of the art object, which is, there's a lot here. It goes to, again, the material being used, the function, what it represents, and like I said, they're in this ancient artifact is influenced, I think, Picasso's work, and there's some videos that were included in the learning unit, and then also you can do further research. So talking about the visual similarities and differences. And then how the ancient artifact might have influenced the contemporary artist's creative process. So again, a little bit of research and you can learn more about, well, how was Pablo Picasso, how did this ancient artifact influence his creative process? And his creative process is something that would be inherent in his painting, his ideas, like in his mind, basically, as he was making this painting. So those are fun things to kind of learn about and research. Ideas relating to the use of the ancient object and the use or interpretation of the modern object. So, you know, this painting would be used most likely to hang in someone's home or in a museum or a gallery, but also the style of Picasso's work had a specific function at the time that it was made. I mean, no one had ever seen an artist make abstract paintings that are still that are obviously representation of a person, but that person almost looked non-human. And so, you know, that's a really big deal for thinking about the interpretation of this modern object and how different that might be of the ancient object, or maybe similar. Like those kinds of things will come up, hopefully, in your research. A brief description of the cultural context of the ancient civilizations. So, you know, what were their belief systems? Why were they making these objects that had a little bit more non-representational visual aesthetics of a human? Like, where did that come from the cultural context of the ancient civilization? And then the artist's cultural context that might have influenced the maker of modern art. So I was kind of just talking about that, how Pablo Picasso was kind of rebelling against what most people considered to be representational, figurative painting. And he was starting to encourage himself and other artists to think in these more abstract forms. So again, that's something that you can research and find more information about. And then the visual signification or symbolism of each object. So again, there's a lot of different prompts here, and some of them you might find a lot of information about. Some of them are a little bit overlapping in their meaning. I'm just trying to give you a variety of different prompts to consider as you're working on the contents of your essay. And here's just more examples of how artwork from the Classic period that was made has just a tremendous amount of influence on some of the paintings that Pablo Picasso made. And here's a short video that will also reference some of these ideas that I'm getting you or inspiring you to think about. So that is Midterm Project Idea 2, to compare ancient art with modern art. And you don't have to use Picasso. These are just examples. Midterm Project 3. Midterm Project Idea 3. So this would be going back and referencing from the Egyptian learning unit when I had you talk about how, you know, these artifacts oftentimes are no longer in the origin, the country in which they were originally discovered. And so, again, I've included prompts here for you to navigate, but it's basically taking, I don't want you to discuss the same exact object that you already did for that homework, but there's a lot of objects that we've discussed, and many of those objects are not in the country of origin. They might be in London, they might be in New York. So you would go through, you would, of course, pick a period. Let's say you want to pick Greek art, and then you would do some research. Most objects, it will indicate, especially in the readings and in the lectures, the name of the artwork, when it was made. And so that's going to give you enough research to then figure out like what museum houses it today and if that's even close to the country of origin. So here again, you're going to want to include the physical properties of the object that you're talking about. And you're going to want to include at least 3 viewpoints arguing for the object to potentially stay in the country that it's in and against. So, really reflecting your ideas about the returning of the ancient object to a museum in the country of origin, or having the ancient object stay where it is. And again, I've presented a lot of videos in that learning unit that you can go back and reference, and you can also do your own research as well. So again, would want to add a paragraph as to should these objects stay where they are or be returned. So you're going to have a pro and con list like the homework, and then your thoughts about that, where they should be housed. And then explain why. So why should the artwork stay in the country that it's in, or why should it be returned? And then finally discuss any ideas for, how the museums around the world could start dealing with, it's complicated because some of the countries of origins where these artifacts are from are, there's varying reasons why it might be difficult if the artifact was returned. It might be a country that's navigating some sort of civil unrest. It might be a country who might not have the funds to house this object. So those are things that you're going to want to think about as you navigate these prompts. Again, if you have any questions or something seems unclear, just send me an email and I can address whatever your concerns are. So this is a reminder to, obviously you're going to include an artwork and have the assessment of physical properties, and then do your best to talk about composition and design with the object, symbolism, and the cultural context. And that's all laid out. Each one of those project ideas further explores the importance of including this piece of a visual analysis. And again, a reminder of the physical properties which I discussed. And then finally, just a reminder of what the requirements are. So a minimum of 800 words, you're embedding an image of the artifact you're discussing in your project, you're including the physical properties. In your introduction, you're going to tell me which historical period, and you're also going to let me know which midterm project you're working with. You're going to include the 4 types of investigation, and then a conclusion. And like I said, it's all of these, you have lots of prompts to follow, so you shouldn't have a problem of writing an essay that with a minimum of 800 words if you include these prompts and then also the different prompts that I've included for each one of the midterm project ideas. So I hope that's helpful information. It gets you started, and just keep me posted with any questions. I'm here to try and help you with making sure that you're clear and comfortable with the requirements for the midterm essay. All right, thank you.